Yeah. So just very quickly, and Naomi, I've actually
here I'm just dipping in on this fascinating
rid of all fossil fuels. So I absolutely
debate
agree with you on
with
that.
Naomi
And that
Klein
is a
and
terrible
Bjorn
travesty.
Lomborg, who I
Remember,
haven't
it's
heard
mostly in
converse
developing
before. I thought
countries,
you'd be interested
where
to see
people
this.
are basically buying off their populations. So it's Saudi Arabia, Russia, China. It used to be Indonesia, India. Sorry, say that again.
That support the poor and the ability to buy petrol,
Yes.
and not rich countries who do not need to be subsidizing their oil and gas industries and are, like my government.
Okay, I would argue, and the International Energy Agency shows that the vast majority, so we're talking 96, 97%, goes to developing countries. But you're absolutely right. You should, for instance, be very careful to not take away subsidies for LNG, which actually often is used by really poor people to not get indoor air pollution in their homes, but take away petrol subsidies, which typically subsidize people who can afford to have a car, which is typically the middle class or above. So we absolutely agree on that point. We also agree that innovation is great. It's wonderful that we've seen solar and wind come down this much. But the problem is that solar and wind is only competitive when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. And we still need a public policy for, and sorry, we still need energy 24/7, and we can only get that one. Certainly not overnight, and certainly not when it's bad weather for weeks on end, as we've seen in Europe. So again, we need much more innovation. And the people who are saying, well, we're ready to roll it all out now, are basically saying, let's just spend a lot of money ineffectively now. Again, I want to come back, and I think this is the real problem. Naomi would love to believe that it's a few really evil fossil fuel barons that are basically in the way. But in America, as you're well known, we have less good data for the rest of the world. But in America, a very large part of the population is not willing to spend very much on tackling global warming. Proposing, for instance, Biden's net zero plan in 2050, if you do it in the most effective way, a new study in Nature shows that this will cost every American every year by 2050 about $11,000 per person per year. The average American is not willing to support $24 increase. Now, we might be able to get them up to a couple $100, but we're never going to be able to get them to thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And suggesting that simply seems to suggest that I'm just going to ignore democracy and hope things work out. That's not the way forward.
Yeah, can I just quickly get on to what Bjorn said?
A lot needs to be done. Ameenah, quickly before I go to a question from one of our audience members. Go ahead.
Yes, Bjorn has been saying a lot about innovation, but innovation is mostly available or owned by 12% of the world's population, and the rest of us living in the global south have to pay royal.
Really important point.
When it came to actually looking at the COVID vaccine, the transfer, because all the laws they have towards the global north. And when it comes to actually accessing the innovative practices where the global south, where the people in the global south live, and for them to survive in a changing climate, it means more money to be paid again to the north. So the whole thing is skewed, and it is not going to get us anywhere until there are major changes to the policy framework, and it is not going to happen, unfortunately.
All right, and a thumbs up from Naomi. But let's go to
2 against 1. Does that count for
2 against 1? Let's go to our students, see what they think about this issue. They've been waiting to ask some of their burning questions. Let's go to one of them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dana. I'm from Gilbert. My question is to you, Bjorn. What does climate justice look like to you?
A simple question, Bjorn.
So I'm not sure Yes, I'm not sure I would call it climate justice, because really what this is about is how we make a better world. And most of how we help the future is not about climate. It's about making sure we get people out of poverty, out of starvation, out of bad schools, out of all these diseases that we can already treat. We should also fix global warming. But what I try to point out is there's two problems. We are almost exclusively focused on climate, and we forget a lot of these other things. And actually, we're spending most of the money that we used to spend, for instance, on development aid, we're now spending on climate aid instead, which is often much less effective. The second part, we should do something about climate. And we should definitely do something that actually helps the entire world. And that's about innovation again. If I can just, answer both your question and really Ameenah's question at the same time. Yes, it's outrageous if the global south has to pay huge costs to use innovation. There's also a lot of push to make these innovations available. But, and again, if innovations are so good that you can actually afford to pay for them, they're typically also such that even when you have to pay for them, you will leave people better off. So one of the things we need to do is to make sure that we get the energy that's so effective and so cheap that everyone will want to buy it.
Naomi, do you agree with Bjorn's definition of climate justice?
No. Look, I just want to pick up on what Ameenah was saying about the COVID vaccine, because I think it's such a powerful example for why I'm sorry, with all respect, that Bjorn is completely wrong that innovation can fix this. Because what an example of innovation, the development in record time of these vaccines. And the whole world wants them. The demand is there. And yet it is blocked because of a system that puts profit before people. And that is the exact same logic that is standing in the way of doing what it takes to respond to this disaster. When you are in a true crisis, and if we think back to fighting fascism during the Second World War, and if we think back to the Great Depression, you know you're in a crisis because you spend what it takes. And you say some things are more important than the market. Something that life is more important than the market. And if we need to do that with vaccines, and we need to do it with climate. And you, Bjorn, I'm sorry, I don't have consensus with you. I'm sorry to let you guys down at Doha debates. I don't have consensus with somebody whose only role in this debate for almost 20 years has been to run out the clock. It is ethically reprehensible.
That's just ridiculous, Naomi, and you know that. What I've been trying to say is what you're actually saying, namely that for 20 years we haven't dealt with this smartly, because people like you have constantly been saying, no, 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 let's do all of it together. And what you end up with is nothing. I'm a little puzzled by this idea of saying that if we'd just done what Naomi had suggested, we would all have—
The concept of the Green New Deal was introduced.
If we had all
in
done what Naomi says, we would not have COVID vaccines. I'm sorry. Yes, the world is not fair. It would be wonderful if the world was entirely fair. But I'm suggesting a little bit, are you living in the real, actually trying to fix problems and make the world better? Or are you living in a world where you say, if it's not going to be fantastic, if it's not going to be total and just, I'm just not going to accept it. You have been living in a world where for 20 years, you've been delaying progress by asking for it all and getting nothing. I would like to say, let's try for something.
I agree
that's
with
smart.
Naomi. I agree with Naomi, because there was a time when the United States was fairer. That was the time which preceded deregulation. And that is this deregulation that's got us to where we are, because the deregulation has only favored a percentage. And unfortunately, a country like America is increasingly being referred to as a plutocracy, where the 1% is controlling the 90%. And the only way to do that is to Americans can benefit more. And right now, as we speak, 60% of Americans cannot afford a crisis of $400. I mean, this is unacceptable from the richest country in the world.
Some powerful points made there. It's buffering a little bit now. I just wanted to make sure this was on your radar. It's a pop-up session of Sustain What, really just to get folks to tune in to a really pretty potent discussion around what are the actual blockades to progress
So it's called
on the
synonymous
planet?
to being communist or being socialist, but we need regulations. We need government to step in. We need government to tax.
More buffering. I encourage you to watch this going forward at Doha Debates. You might have to register, although it is on YouTube also. I'm going to just post a link to YouTube and you can watch it later.
And we do not want that much philanthropy. We need more tax dollars.
But Bjorn, how
Sorry about the buffering and the slowness. I'm not sure which end that's on, but this is a pretty powerful and interesting discussion.
how
Let
do
me
you
just very, very
solve this
quickly-
crisis? But hold on, how do you solve this crisis within a system?
I'm going to cut this short and see if we can tune in later. I'll try to set up a session to review this discussion once it's done. It may be possible for you to watch it on the
In a system that keeps
link without the
perpetuating
lag.
these inequities.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be a waste of time to keep going here. I'll post the link later, and thank you for tuning in. This has been a very short Sustain What episode, really informal, just to get folks to tune into the Doha Debates discussion between Bjorn Lomborg, Naomi Klein, and the former president of Mauritius. Pretty
Sorry,
interesting.
Me?
Some powerful points.
To you, Bjorn, yes. How do you solve the crisis?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to just tune out. Thank you again for playing along with what I call Sustain What.